sometimes when you do well in your original fantasy leagues, you can make millions. But you go out and get Charlie Blackmon, and you can make billions, Chris.
I don't want to talk about Charlie Blackmon. It's just the most annoying thing because I drafted him in 2 leagues, and then when there was all the uncertainty about which outfielders they use, and he had a bad spring, and they brought 4 guys up for the third outfielder. They had Cargo and Kadir. That was their starters. There's no DH. Morneau's at first. So there were 4 guys. There was Blackmon, Corey, what's his name? Dickerson, Drew Stubbs, and Brandon Barnes, all for one spot. And the guy who had the worst preseason of all of them was Blackmon. So I dropped him in 2 leagues. And now it's just killing me to see him not only stealing bases and hitting 400, but hitting home runs and just scoring tons of runs. So,
and it's not even hot at Coors Field yet. I mean, this is happening in April, and it's already acting like a pinball machine there. Funny thing is, it wasn't even that he had a bad spring training. It was that he had a bad first couple of weeks of spring training. I mean, you want to talk about completely arbitrary endpoints there that people were basing their decisions on. And, we probably had notes on it that way, and I know others did too. And because I saw Corey Dickerson rising everywhere. I mean, it wasn't just us. It was everywhere. Just think about that, how silly that is. Okay, so Corey Dickerson did a little bit better in the first 3 weeks against Double-A pitchers than Charlie Blackmon did.
Yeah, it's weird. You know what? That's a good point. I probably read a note, and I started getting a little soured. And, he was a guy who was fighting for a job to begin with. I mean, he was a marginal player. He easily could just, have wound up in the minors or released or whatever. He's not a real big prospect. He's already 27 or 26. He's not like, a 22-year-old that they're seeing as the future of the team. And they obviously didn't believe in him very much the last couple of years. They didn't give him a huge opportunity. And so when you have players who are so, kind of not, that important, but their role is potentially important, starter at Coors Field, these little pieces of information that may be just not that good can really sway something. Like, for instance, though, if you have a player that has a prominent role, who's established, who's expensive, like a Jose Fernandez or somebody, a bad start in spring training here, something his coach says there, it's not going to move the needle. It takes a lot more to matter for a player who's important. But a player who, is one of 4 guys competing for one spot, who doesn't have a pedigree, just a little, and I'm not going to say it was misinformation, but like a little bit of information can be badly misinterpreted and totally screw you up.
To illustrate that point, I have 2 leagues where I drafted him. One was Mixed Labor, which drafted mid-February. The other was the NFBC Draft Champions League, one of those 50-round slow drafts that I think started late January, early February. I just wanted to get a good feel for what NFBC players were doing early on and just to kind of get back in the mindset there a little bit there. Those are the 2 leagues where I drafted him, where I didn't have that wrong information. I picked him up in the main event league, but I had to fab him. I stayed away from drafting him in all these leagues. When I know you and I spent multiple times talking about him, how we liked him. And of course, we talked ourselves out of it in drafts that mattered on later on, just because of all that tiny little shred of information.
But I did draft him. I drafted him.
And then you dumped him. Yeah.
And I dumped him in the FSTA in January. Thank God I don't care about that league. And then 2, but people are going to be like, oh, I crushed you in that league, and I'm like, yeah, because I dropped Charlie Blackmon. And then and then I drafted him in Friends and Family, where, that one especially, it's so fungible at the back end of your roster that you finish the draft, and it was early March that we did the draft, like March 11th or something. And then by the end of March, you've already picked up and dropped 4 guys because that's what you do in that league.
Exactly. And that's just really aggravating to have that happen. We were talking a lot of outliers on today's show. Jesse Chavez was another one. Learned a new pitch, maybe. I totally got this one wrong, Chris. I have 0 shares of Jesse Chavez. In fact, I think I projected him for 10 games, 10 starts, I should say, and I thought he'd be demoted back to the bullpen after that because he's Jesse Chavez. He's not any good. Look at his track record. He's not good at all. And, of course, no, he's been great. He's picked up a strikeout rate. He learned a new pitch, and that's all that's mattered.
Well, it's funny because I had Jared Parker in labor, and he went down, and who's going to replace him? Oh, maybe Drew Pomerantz. I had Drew Pomerantz on reserve, but Pomerantz has actually pitched pretty well as a middle reliever, and maybe at some point he gets a shot. But apparently the guy who had jumped ahead of him, I guess Tom Malone was always kind of ahead of him, but the guy who jumped ahead of Pomerantz was Jesse Chavez. And Scott Genstad, who knows the A's extremely well, it's his team, I think he said something about when we were on Twitter, I think he said, the A's really like Chavez for some reason. And I looked at Chavez's numbers and stuff, and I thought, wow, as a middle reliever, he was just okay. He's 30. I mean, and then that's information. So we had bad information that was Charlie Blackmon struggling, and then we had this good information I got from a guy who follows the A's, but I'm like, what does that mean that they like him? You know what I mean? Is that there's some quote in the paper, oh, yeah, we like him, we're going to give him a shot, he's looking good at spring training, or is it, no, we really believe that there's something that this guy's figured out? And again, it's parsing what these things mean, and I really didn't take it that seriously. And I did.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say there's this universe of players too. I mean, it's not like there's 200 guys we have to pay attention to. No, there's 800 guys we have to pay attention to in spring training. You can't sift through every single little nugget in spring training and oh yeah, this really I'm buying, but this one I'm not. And it's easy to look back now and say, oh yeah, the A's really liked him, and yeah, we should be paying close attention to that. And sometimes it's just whatever catches our eye, whatever registers with us. And trying to separate the news from the noise, trying to figure out what actually matters. It's so hard in baseball. It's really tough to stay on top of everything, especially when you're writing all these articles and shooting all these videos. You're just spending all day just studying it. That's fine. It's one thing. But if you're actually trying to do everything else that runs the site and all that, it's a little bit. It's another.
Well, yeah, especially if you're doing football.
Right.
But
or hockey, or like I'm doing a lot of. But yeah, exactly.
So, but the thing that I find is the most challenging, the more I do this and the more serious I get, is really just keeping up on all the players, not just preseason, but during the season. So the other day you tweeted, would you take D. Gordon or Jimmy Rollins? And I was like, of course I'd take Gordon. I have Gordon in 2 leagues. I'm paying attention to what Gordon's doing. He's been very good. But then I took a look at Rollins, and he's got a couple homers, right? And then I looked at, look what he did in 2012. Maybe last year was just he was playing hurt or something was wrong with him last year. He's 35, but maybe he still is like a 15 homer, 25 steal guy at shortstop who's going to get the runs from hitting toward the top of the lineup, and he's going to get some RBIs. And you get a D. Gordon who, sure, if he keeps the roll all year, he could steal 50, 60 bases, but the runs and RBIs and power, there's a lot of different categories that he's not doing, and he has a little bit more danger of losing his job if he slumps. And I started to think, wow, I just had an idea about Jimmy Rollins that I didn't really, until I looked at it afterward, it was like, maybe it's closer than I thought. And so, it's Jimmy Rollins, just a guy that I had an impression of from the preseason, when I just thought, okay, here's a guy in decline. He had a bad age 34 season, and there's just so many players that you have to keep updating based on what they're doing. And it's like, well, what does it matter what Jimmy Rollins did for 3 or 4 weeks? Well, it kind of matters when you're choosing between 2012 and 2013 Jimmy Rollins and trying to decide, is this sort of the beginning of the end? Or is this sort of just an anomalously bad year? And sometimes a month of 2014 will sway your opinion a bit because it'll make you think, oh, he looks like the guy in 2012, therefore 2013 is the outlier. It's like Ryan Braun. What's the real Ryan Braun? He had a monster year in 2012. Was that post-steroids? Was he still on him then? Who knows? If he starts raking for a month and a half, especially with this injury, you think, okay, that is the real Ryan Braun. So even a month of action or 3-4 weeks is going to start to really tip the balance of these guys that are really on the cusp of, which direction are they heading in.
Right. And the other thing I think is, and we talked about this, I think there's some confirmation bias possibilities here too. You were on a D. Gordon before the season started. You thought that he was going to be better. He was hitting great in spring training. He had the job. You actually landed him in Friends and Family. So I'm not saying that you have this, but I'm saying this is possible that, okay, now that he's done that, this is the guy that everyone thought he could be at the start of 2012. But what if it's just a hot month? What if he kind of goes back to being the old D. Gordon again? Maybe he goes through his first rough patch, goes through a nice 1-for-20 slump there. Then what happens? Which is the real D. Gordon now?
Well, I look at his numbers at AAA, and he was pretty good. He was a 280, 290 hitter with a 370, 380 on base percentage. Obviously, doesn't slug for anything. And as a shortstop, with some range, that's pretty good. And so I think he was a real prospect coming up. I thought he was a prospect. He wasn't, an elite prospect, but he was a good prospect. He was a shortstop that could get on base and obviously run. And he gets called up in 2012 to start the year, and he steals 30 bases in half a season, but he doesn't really hit. And then he loses the job because he's not really producing offensively. So he gets sent down in the second half of 2012, And then 2013, he doesn't really get a call until late in the season, and he does okay. And now he's 25 or 26, and it's 2014, and he gets the job because Alex Guerrero really wasn't ready during spring training. He looks more than ready now. He looks like he's crushing it in the minors in 38 at bats. But I don't really see where D. Gordon really screwed up that bad. I mean, he was at 24, he got called up and struggled for half a season as a rookie. So to me, he was always this guy kind of. He's not going to hit 350 or whatever he's hitting, but he hit 270, get on base at 320, 325, play defense at shortstop or second base in this case, and steal a lot of bases? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and the funny thing here too is he struggled really badly defensively, and I got to wonder how much that weighed on him on the plate. Fans start booing him, things like that. That can all kind of compound. Let me ask the other flip side of this here. You're stuck with a slumper, a guy that's off to a horrible start, a guy who isn't a fully established star. Are you predisposed to believing he'll turn it around because you believed in him beforehand, or are you more negative?
Well, like if it's a star, I'm predisposed to think he's going to turn it around unless there's some reason not to. A guy I don't own is Edwin Encarnacion, and I'm a little nervous because of the strikeouts are way higher than they were. So I never like to have a change in his profile. If the profile is the same, like Eric Hosmer is the exact same, just hasn't hit any home runs yet, right?
Okay.
And that's fine. He's not a home run hitter. He'll hit 18 maybe, and maybe instead of 21 or 22, what I thought he'll hit 18 because he hasn't had any in April. He could have 4 or 5 now. He has none. But I wouldn't worry about that because there's nothing in his profile that says he's a different hitter than he was last year. Whereas Encarnacion is striking out a whole lot more, and that makes me a little nervous, though I would still just figure, he'll figure it out, still. There's not, Billy Butler's another guy I have. I mean, he's been terrible, but he was terrible for the beginning of last year. In the second half, he kind of got it together and didn't quite salvage the season, but he wasn't bad. So, unless there's a really good reason, I have A.J. Pollock now. He's far from a star, but I thought, I drafted him like the 17th round in NFBC. I drafted him ahead of Melky Cabrera, Mike Morris, a bunch of other outfielders that are doing quite a bit better than he is. And obviously I'm worried that he's lost his job, and I just want Kirk Gibson to get fired so they can just do the right thing, give him his at-bat, and see where he's at. But with Trumbo out, Cody Ross is 34, and he's, just coming back from an injury. Why are they playing Tony Campana? I mean, Gerardo Parra's fine. He plays defense, but what is going on here?
Well, I think Pollock's dealing with a sore neck, too, and I think that's part of it.
Well,
maybe he's always looking over his shoulder to see who's going to play in his place.
Yeah, that's probably what it is, yeah.
What about Jason Hayward? I don't know if you have any shares of him this year, but this is a guy that, we were waiting for him to put it all together. He had that great rookie year, and then since then he's had injuries and slumps and all that, and he's off to a rough start this year. What do you feel about a guy like him?
I only have him in the FSTA league, and it's funny, I didn't draft him because I started to think that Freddie Gonzalez doesn't run, and I felt like once you took away the steals, he's not a batting average guy that you could count on. Mm-hmm. And then so what really is there's power, but it's mostly potential just based on his frame because he hits a lot of ground balls. So it was kind of like, what am I really buying at the price that he costs? So I didn't draft him. And then he's stolen 4 bases already, I think, or something like that. But nothing else is working. So it's funny. He health, but I just think that's just part of the deal with him. He goes through stretches of hot and cold. Maybe I don't know more than most players, but I've definitely had him a lot last couple of years, and I definitely remember a lot of slumps.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about another thing we were going over here. Talking about some of our expert leagues. Well, not our expert league, the NFBC, and how just winning the overall contest, it's akin to a poker tournament. How you have to win some all-ins, you have to have a few breaks along the way.
Yeah, every single day that I have a pitcher going that's kind of sketch. I had Jason Hamill hosting Arizona. I'm like, I'm going to use him for the matchup, but he could give up 7 runs in 2 innings. I had Marty Perez in Oakland. He could give up 8 runs or 6 runs in 3 or 4 innings, but he pitches a complete game shutout. Every time I have my team, the team that I have the closer for that's up 5-1 in the 8th, and then the setup guy gives up a run, so it's 5-2, and then my closer actually gets the save, converts crisply. I think each one of those things is like winning a pot. It's like winning a hand. Some of them are more like all-ins where you have a 2-start week with a scrubby pitcher and he just crushes it. Those things can go either way, and there's some luck involved. And I've just been winning a lot of those in the main event. I think I'm 22nd right now. And, knock on wood, I mean, some of my offensive guys have been struggling, and Hamilton's hurt. But everybody else, like, my pitching has just been crushing it. Willie Peralta, Jason Hamill, Martin Perez. These guys are just coming in, and every start it seems like they're doing well. And I keep thinking, when's my luck going to run out? I mean, Ivan Nova, I guess, was bad luck. He out for the year and got shelled on his way out, so that didn't help. But on balance, it's been good. And it's like a poker term. You're not going to win every pot, but you start to accumulate some chips, and you can afford to lose a pot here or a pot there. And I just feel like this is what it is. It's like this long, like, main event tournament, like in the World Series, where I've got to just win just a vast, disproportionate amount of the pots that I should just due to random luck. And if I can do that, especially with the strategy I had, because I got a pretty deep bunch of hitters. Hopefully some of them hold up and Hamilton comes back. I got great closers. And so it's really all about the starting pitching, which really is gambling.
It is. Paul Phillips used to play a lot of professional tournament poker. He used to read his live journal back when live journal was a thing. It might still be a thing. I don't know. But at any rate, he was a guy I always liked to read. And he was going deep into a tournament at Commerce. And 6 times he was all in as a favorite. And he showed the math on just how hard it is just to win those 6 where he was the favorite.
Right.
And it was like a 5%, or it was less than that, the chance that he'd win all 6 of those hands. And that's with cards where you have known values. When you're dealing with players that have a lot more variables and non-fixed values, it's got to be, you have all these odds plays in your way, but still, it's even far less likely it all goes your way. It's that much harder to do that.
Right. I mean, the thing that's harder is you don't really know how much of a favorite you are the way you would in poker, right? But secondly, although in poker, if you don't know the guy's hand exactly, then you also don't know how much of a favorite you are before you put your chips in. Usually you don't have the luxury of knowing before you put your chips in. And second, but the thing that's to your advantage is that because they're not fixed, I don't know. I don't want to get all psychic on you, but like I think you can kind of get a feel for how these guys are pitching a little bit. You don't want to say, well, I think the deck is due for sort of a 6 of diamonds right now, so I'm gonna go all in because I'm chasing the diamond flush here. So, but I think if you watch a lot of baseball, sometimes you just get a sense about a pitcher. You watch him a few times, you're like, I saw something I liked the last couple times out or the last couple of days. It doesn't always work. Momentum in sports is overrated, but so. I don't know if I really have an ability to do that or anybody does, but at least it feels like, when it's going well, you feel like you can kind of figure it out a little bit. But again, you have to realize there's just some dumb luck involved to the point that, like, hey, I need to get the luck. And I guess when it's going right, it's like picking games against the spread. You feel like you know what you're doing. And when it's going south, you feel totally lost. So, maybe it's an illusion. Whether it is or not, it doesn't really matter. The point is, you're right. It is like that. It is like to win those 6 all-ins in a row. To get Marty Perez and Hamill, and Cingrani today. I mean, Cingrani's a little bit better. But, Willie Peralta has been going for me. It just every one of them. And how long are those guys going to last? And if they do fall apart, is there someone on the waiver wire that I'll end up picking up that'll be like that? I just picked up Andrew Heaney. And if he comes up at June 5th or something and pitches 3 months of 3 ERA ball with 120 strikeouts or 100 strikeouts, things like that too are going to be huge needle movers.
Exactly. And the other way the analogy fails is that you have pocket 8s, but you're guessing on Friday that your opponent's going to have pocket 5s. You just have to go all in now. That's the other thing. That's where it kind of fails a little bit there. But anyways, so yeah,